Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today, I want to talk about the current state of the market and the pricing that everyone seems to be so afraid of. And what I want to point out is that this is something that we have always seen in the history of this hobby. And instead of this idea that the hobby is crashing, the real state of the hobby is this: it's flattening. And the fact that there's been flat prices in the hobby for long periods of time is the truth. Some cards over years gain small increments year over year, and over time, if you look at it, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the price point does change enough to be enough that it's noticeable. It's like this card used to be worth $400, now it's worth $1,000, right? Over the course of 15, 20, 30 years, right? That was the normal way pricing used to be looked at in the hobby, was that you weren't going to make a ton of money, but if you held on for a lot of years, you would get more money for that card than you originally bought, and it would be somewhat substantial if it was a lot of years. But in general, pricing in the hobby tends to be flat. I'm going to give you some examples to show you how the hobby was. But I will say this, is that post 2021, there was an overall lift and then a flattening, but it's not going to go back down to where it was prior to that 2020, 2021 period. It's just not. It won't go to that point anymore. I firmly believe that the market has jumped. It's sort of like, think of it as like two shelves. Like we were at this level and now we're at this level. Okay. And so that delta between those two, levels is going to remain somewhat. Now, could it erode? Yeah, of course. Will it go back to that pre-existing level? No, I don't think we'll go back to that level in the near future, or probably ever. But the idea that prices will flatten, meaning that we won't see these dramatic shifts upward in price for a lot of cards, and the flattening, the decline and flattening of the prices, just means that there's not a lot of opportunity to buy something and flip it and make a lot of money quick. So let's look at the first card. And the first card I'm going to put on the screen here is a pretty well-known card, the 52 Mantle. I know it was just recently sold, I think, in a 8 and lost all this money, right? Okay, so what's going on? Well, the 4 is, to me, a much more commonly sold card than an 8 or a 9 in this card itself, this 52 Mantle. So there's a lot more sales in the lower grades. But what you're seeing here from 2014 to basically 2020, the card went from around $2,000 to $25,000 to, $30,000, right? Sorry, I'm off by a number. About $22,000 to $25,000 to around $35,000, right? So in, basically 6 to 7 years, the card went up, 20%, let's say. That seems pretty normal for a card that's really popular. It's literally one of the most popular cards in the hobby. That's a normal growth. And obviously when it hit that big jump, it went to 100,000, and now what we're seeing is price flattening around the $9,000 to $10,000 range, right? We're seeing multiple sells, 90,000. I'm still off a factor here. 88, 94, one did sell here at 69, but then you get back to 10, 9, 87, 12. So again, it's flattening out. What I'm going to predict is, as you look at these prices and you look at this historical trend here, of how pricing used to work in the hobby, 9, 10 years ago, is we're going to see a flattening out of this card. You're going to see a long period of time where this card sells within, $5,000 to $10,000 of the last price consistently. One that's better centered might sell for, let's say, $95,000 or $85,000 if it goes a little lower. And then one that's poorly centered might sell for $70,000, might sell for $75,000. That is how these how these vintage cards typically work. The visual appeal of that card does make a tremendous difference on the pricing, but in general, it's going to be within a certain range. It's going to be pretty flat. That's what we've seen historically, right? Another card, and look at this one. This is one I picked by choice because I want to show you this kind of bifurcated pattern here. So you've got the 55 Topps Koufax, and we've already seen, again, back to 2014, this card was selling say $3,000 to $5,000. All of a sudden, the card jumped up here in multiple sales to $25,000 to $30,000 with a high of $80,000. And we all know, for people who were in the hobby in 2016, and this was a targeted buying group that was trying to inflate the price of certain cards. The card, it quickly came back down from that $20,000 back to $10,000, and so it kind of stayed in that $9,000 to $10,000 range for a long period of time, for 2016. So about 4 years, it was selling around $10,000, and all of a sudden you hit the next shelf. Remember, I keep saying these are like shelves, and we're seeing this shelf go up to $40,000, and now we're back down to $25,000. Okay, so, and we're flattening, right? We're flattening back out. So it's very common to see these sort of movements, right? We're not seeing this straight line movement up. This isn't a logarithmic curve, okay? This is not what we're seeing year over year, 5, 10, 20, 30% growth, right? This is not the pattern we've ever seen in vintage cards. We see generically small periods of growth year over year, or flattening, where it goes up and down within a certain range. And then an event happens, right? 2016, you had the buyers group. Now you had COVID, you had a lot of people getting in the hobby, you had this influx of money, you had influencers, social media, you had all this stuff happening, and you had the shelf created for these cards, and you're seeing the slow erosion back to a smaller base. So again, I don't think we're going to go all the way back down to $10,000, but again, could this card settle at $20,000, right, or $25,000? I think so. I think it's already flattening. It's already selling within a certain range multiple times around the $25,000 price point. Another example, and again, I want to show sort of a different pattern. And this is the 60 Hanker, and I talk about it a lot, but this card has a lot smaller availability than the PSA 8. So what I want to show is a card that has periodically had a lot of peaks, right? So here in early 14, it was selling in that $600, $600 to $800 range. Certain sells $1,400, sell here at $1,600, and what you're seeing here, and then kind of this created this sell here, created this shelf, right? So all of a sudden we went from $800 to $1,600 with a sell in between of $1,500, and then all of a sudden the card is selling over $1,000 consistently, right? 11, 12, 14. So then it stayed there for basically 4 years, 4 to 5 years. We've got this consistent sales around 1,000, and then sometimes you pop up to 16, pop up to 2,600, but back down to 1,000, 12, $1,500. This card was within a $400 to $500 price range, and again, I want to tell you is that that range in pricing was a lot, probably driven a lot by how nice the card looked, right? And again, the reason why you also see these big pop-ups is because, let's say the card was well centered, it's in a really good auction house, and you might see things like that happen, and it doesn't come up for sale a ton. You'll see 4 to 5 sales a year, and that means that if you're looking to put together a Hank Aaron set, a 60 top set, which is an incredibly popular set, you don't get a lot of chances to buy a Hank Aaron in this kind of condition. And then we had the great 2020, where this card went from that $1,500 to up to $4,000. But what the funny thing that's happened is it's maintained that pricing and has gotten even higher in a lot of examples than that big price jump in 2020, 2021. And why is that? Well, it's because it's rare. It's hard to find. It doesn't come up for sale very often. And that is one of the few triggers that when you say, well, I want to invest into a card or invest in the market that's going to continuously go up or have more of this, straight line upward mobility, rare cards and hard to get condition has always been the magic, right? That's been the magic sauce for this whole hobby for decades, is find rare stuff in the best condition, and your chances of having that card be worth more money at a much higher trajectory is so much better than buying common, easy to find material that's always found in good condition and having it in sort of like the normal or average condition. That will make that card be very flat because it's easy to get and easy to find in the condition you have it in. And that's what you're seeing with a lot of modern cards. Is it's not rare to find a PSA 10 or a PSA 9 of modern cards. That grade does not make that card special. And so why wouldn't those prices flatten out? Because availability of those cards is so high. This card has limited availability of a player that's extremely popular from an extremely popular set. So that's why this card has peaked even higher and later than that 2020-2021 run. And even the last sale is very similar to these COVID era sales, where the card hasn't bottomed out, it hasn't created this another shelf, and this is a lower shelf consistently. Do I predict this card to sell over $4,000, which is the current VCB average? Yes. I think in the future this card could bring another $5,000 or $6,000, because if it's perfectly centered with great color, it looks beautiful, and it hasn't sold in a while, and someone's putting together a set, yes, that card could bring more than $4,000 because of the availability is so low and it's such a popular card. All right, moving into modern. So let's go to the King Griffey Jr. 93 Finest. Right, 93 Finest, King Griffey Jr. Here we go. Prior, this card was consistently around $1,200 to $1,500 for a lot of years. Right, so for like 5 years, then a few sales, but then back down, and then we had sort of the 2019, still there, and then obviously the run up, and now we're seeing a pretty flat run up. Pretty flattening of this curve. So 7,000, 8,400, 7,800, the recent high 6,000. But again, it took a card, that was basically in that $1,500 range and made it a $5,000, $4,000 to $5,000 card, pretty consistent. And we're seeing the flattening. This price right here is for a base card. That's not a refractor. So it seems like it's already flattened out and been pretty stable in that $4,500 to $5,000 range. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sales. That seems pretty consistent. Yeah, one did pop up to 6, one did go down to 44, but if you average that out, that's a pretty consistent graph there to show this card is about a $4,500 card, and the VCP average is $4,610. So going into a card show, I would be expecting to pay between $4,000 to $5,000 for this card. And again, that card, in 2018 and 2019 was around $1,500. I would walk into a show expecting to pay between $1,200 and $2,000, depending on the dealer and the condition. Now I'm going to have to pay $4,000 to $5,000. And that means that the hobby has, from a money perspective, gotten more expensive. But this flattening out just means that, you missed the boat to cash in right here. You're probably not going to get another chance to go from, to double your money. This card isn't going to go to $10,000 anytime soon. We're seeing it flatten, and again, that's what's happening. And then last but not least is a great 86 Fleer Michael Jordan and a PSA 9. Yes, the old PSA 9. And the reason why I brought this up is because there's so many sales. This card is not rare. Not rare in the slightest, guys. Not rare. It's not rare. Just keep repeating that to yourself. The 86 Fleer Jordan is not rare. It's highly desirable, meaning that for the amount printed, there's a lot of people who want the card, but it's not rare. That's why you see a lot of sales. Okay. Within the sales, there's like a million. It feels like a million sales. But you can see in 2014, we'll go back here, it was a $2,500 and up to $3,000. So it was a $2,000 to $3,000 card. You zoom 5 years later, it's still a $3,000 card. Then in 18, it kind of pumped up to $4,000 to $5,000 and $6,000. So this card has a little bit of a trajectory. And if I move my search bar here to short it out, you'll see a little bit more of that curve isn't quite as flat, right? You see that little pump in 2016. 2016, guys. We know there's some hanky panky, or am I allowed to use that? Am I going to get a copyright strike for saying that word? Then it came back down. So it came back down. So let's pull back out. Okay, it came back down. Then it came back up again. So 2018, we really saw a consistent pricing where that card was over $5,000, $6,000. Then this card just kind of blew up. Again, I think this is where it's hard to really understand, market conditions, but I think honestly people just really like the card and it's in high demand. Then you had the giant jump. So you get this great jump here, obviously tons of sales as it's going up to this, this stupid price point here. I'm trying to hit it. Oh no, it's like 80, almost $90,000 for this card. So if you think about it, a card that was selling consistently early in 2014 in that $2,000 to $3,000 range, now in 18 and 19 it's selling for $4,000 to $5,000. Now it's $90,000. That's just dumb, right? Everyone knew that was dumb. Everyone knew that that wasn't going to be sustainable. It hit it again here, but again, we know some of these prices probably were manipulated. Maybe sales didn't really happen, but then all of a sudden we're back down in that $10,000 to $20,000 range, and recently this card has been trending closer to $15,000, which is what it was here in that early 2020 range. And again, is it going to go back down to this pre-2020 range of $5,000 to $6,000? So $15,000 versus say $5,000 to $6,000 is really what, if I was owning this card, I'd be worried about, because it's not rare. We've established that it's not rare. The 93 Finest Griffey, even though I do believe that there's more than the stated print run, just because of all the collectors I've talked to, we can debate that at a different time. The 266 or whatever that's reported, it's still rare. There's not a lot of them out there. 60 Aaron, pretty rare. 52 Mays, a lot rarer than an 86 Flair Jordan. Okay, 55 Koufax, a lot rarer than an 86 Jordan, right? So availability is not the issue here. You can buy this card probably all day long, every day, on any auction houses, or just find a dealer who has this card. There's a ton of them out there. It's really around the idea is this card so iconic and so popular, will this price sustain? And that's where I would be a little nervous. Of all cards I'm going to be talking about on the list today, this is the one that I feel could go even lower to get closer to maybe $10,000, right? Get to that, go from 15 to 10. I would actually think that is much more realistic than it going from 15 to 25, or doubling in price again, right? That is just what we have to worry about. That is, if I owned this card, I would be more nervous about this card going a little bit lower than what it is now. Again, it's already back down to that 15, selling for close to $15,000 a few times, $15,000, $16,000. I mean, they had one sell at $15,500. So it's there already. Could it go to 10? I think that it could. And it's just because it's so available. It's so easy to find, guys. It's not a hard card to find. And I've said that like a million times, but I just want to make sure you understand that that's the reason this card is behaving the way it is. Now, look, Jordan has the most amount of, I call pumpers in the hobby, that don't want the values to go down, that will do crazy things to keep values from really going down to levels that they should based on availability. So this is one of those cards that might get protected, might get people to just hoard it. I mean, we've seen guys in the hobby, multiple people on Instagram that have hundreds of these cards, right? And what's to prevent them from just keep buying more of these to make sure the price never really drops to $10,000 again, right? So this is a card I'd be worried about if I was holding it. Honestly, I mean, if you bought it over here, in that 4 to 5, 10,000, 6,000, say between $3,000 and $10,000, I would say you're good. Hold it. I don't think it's going to go down below 10,000 anytime soon, but I don't think you're going to be making much more money than that. And if you have a chance to cash in, maybe you do, because the chances of it popping back up to 30 is pretty low in my opinion. So, but that's how we should be looking at the market, right? A flattening. It's a flattening of the market. It means that buying a card and doubling and tripling in value anytime soon is not going to happen unless you can find this kind of unicorn card, which is high demand, low pop count, hard to find, and in the best condition, or the condition that people really, really want. If you can do those three things, and that have a market that's out there that has more than just one or two people that want it, so you got to have, again, high demand, then you have a chance of making money in this hobby. And again, modern cards don't behave like this. This is more vintage and 90s cards. Modern cards are driven by player performance and other factors, right? But this is just for cards that you're buying that you'd want invested in. This is sort of that whole investor spiel that people give you guys for what you should be buying and investing in. What I'm telling you is get ready for the great flattening, where your prices for a majority of the cards that you own that are vintage, probably some 90s cards are going to be in that area pretty soon. I've talked about 90s cards have gone way up. I think we're going to see a great flattening there at some point. There's just going to be a long period of time in this hobby where prices just go flat for good cards, for big cards, for rookie cards, Hall of Fame rookie cards, it's just going to go flat because that's the history of the hobby. It's historically a flat line for a lot of years. And then an event, something happens, it moves and then it creates another little shelf and then it stays there for a while, then it goes up again. That's more historical, right? We don't see these curves. We don't see these great logarithmic patterns here in the hobby. It just doesn't happen. So that's my take on really what pricing is happening in the hobby, especially around these investor grade cards. I'm not going to talk about modern cards. We all know there's other factors at play. This is for what people are saying are the blue chip investor cards, how you should be looking at them. I appreciate if you've subscribed or if you viewed my channel. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time in Cards and Comics. Bye.